How lovely to be talking to you.
And you, Ellen.
I want to talk to you about your own experiences of your parents ageing. Maybe we could start with your father. And it seemed something that maybe isn't often discussed is the extent to which, as people age and we deal with them as carers, all the unresolved issues of our lives with them need to be resolved at the most inconvenient moment.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I've discovered is that, you think that being a carer is a noble role to fulfill and that somehow this is going to improve the dynamics. But in fact, what it does is it seems to concentrate all the worst dysfunctional elements of your relationship. And you might think, oh, there's going to be abundant reconciliation and there's going to be gratitude. Well, forget that. There isn't. Everything that was wrong with the relationship is exacerbated by the crisis and by the diminution of agency that the person that you're caring for feels. And so I think that there are an awful lot of illusions that well-intentioned children feel when they step into this role. And that's certainly been my experience both with my father, who got vascular dementia very suddenly, and we had always had an absolutely terrible relationship. So I was terrified of caring for him because I just thought there isn't enough love in the bank. I don't have enough love in the account to do this. And now my father's dead after 8 years of dementia. My 90-year-old mother has come from England to live with me. I am the only child, and therefore this role has fallen on me. I didn't have much say. And yet again, the complications of the relationship I've had with her over a lifetime are now playing out larger than life.
Tell me about your father, because I think I read somewhere that he had said at one stage his great regret was that he didn't have a better relationship with you. Why didn't he?
Because we were too alike. And so I think, we just knocked and locked horns all the time. He was a very tyrannical, didactic, interventionist father, very old school, brought up in a kind of Prussian home in Vienna before he came to England as a refugee, a Jewish refugee, as part of Kindertransport at the age of 10, which was obviously a life-changing experience and very positive in one way, but also very traumatic. He managed to get his mother out subsequently, but he didn't get his father out, and he lived with the guilt of that, I think, for the rest of his life. And so my father was semi-orphaned and fostered. So he didn't have a very good sense of what a normal family was. We were very alike, but he was also naturally very quick of temper. He had very high standards, and he expected you to do things his way. Of course, all of that falls away with dementia. And the thing about vascular dementia, as opposed to Alzheimer's, is it is not gradual. He went in for an operation, he came out of hospital, and he was demented. So there was no time to adjust to the dementia and no time to even consider a caring role or what he needed. He went into hospital perfectly sane one day, needing a tumor to be removed from the bowel. And when the operation was successful and he was sent back home 3 days later, he was as mad as a meat axe.
And what did he need from you?
Well, he didn't really know who I was anymore. I mean, it didn't matter what he needed. He needed help, but I mean, he was psychotic, he was violent, he was delusional, he absconded from the hospital and police had to bring him back. He'd absconded from the hospital in his pajamas and no one on the ward had noticed. And when he came home, he tried to saw through the front door with a credit card. And at one stage, I had to sneak into the kitchen at night and grab all the knives because I thought he might turn violent. I mean, he was unrecognizable, and the way he saw both my mother and myself, we were the enemy for a lot of the time. He didn't recognize us. He didn't know who we were anymore. Or he did know sometimes, intermittently and fleetingly, there would be these little bursts of sanity like sun coming through clouds, and then he would retreat completely back into the fog.
Why would a reserve of love and a great relationship have made it wouldn't have made any difference to him. Why would it have made a difference to you? Because that is an almost impossible situation to manage.
It is, but you need love as the kind of fuel in your tank for the resolve to fight on the person's behalf. And if that person has been abusive to you and violent to you, as my father had in my case, it's very hard to necessarily feel like you are going to be the best possible advocate and carer for someone who in the past has hurt you really deeply. And it was a very, very frightening question and concern for me. And to be absolutely honest, my parents did not have a brilliant relationship. It was not a fantastic marriage. And when push came to shove and my father needed help, my mother could not give it to him. And so it fell to me. And the great thing is that I found there was enough love in the tank. I just didn't know which tank it was.
So we're talking about elder abuse, but in fact, the people more at risk in a sense, I mean, he was at risk obviously from his dementia and what he might have done to himself or situations he might have got himself into, but you were at risk in that environment, weren't you?
Look, I think the elephant in the room for me at this conference has been that it's everything is being presented as if elder abuse were a one-way street. And now that I'm caring for my mother, who is French and rather vinegary and has a very strong personality and absolutely zero cognitive decline at the age of 90, thank goodness, enormous mental curiosity, enormous kind of mental energy and attack, if you like, is that carers are abused too. And it's not spoken about much. And even if carers are not directly abused in terms of, say, violence, there can be rudeness, there can be bitterness, there can be a spiteful resentment of the fact that you now have control over someone's life, their finances, and other aspects of their well-being. So again, you have this kind of noble illusion and fantasy in your mind. You think, I am going to be the model daughter. And you're not going to be the model daughter. You're going to be the same flawed daughter you were before. It's just that the situation is now acute. And it seems to me that carers burn out all the time. Carers are very, very bad at saying, I have to stop now, I have to step away, I need to take a break, I need some me time, I need privacy. We are really bad at this. And I went to a workshop about how to develop more resilience as a carer. And they used that analogy with the plane when the pressure drops and the oxygen mask comes down, which of course it never does, thank God. But anyway, they said you should follow exactly the same protocol, that you fit your own mask first before you help another person. But this is completely counterintuitive, because you think to yourself,
I'll be right.
I'll be all right. Yes, whereas my needy mother or my needy child is always the example with the plane, I have to help the vulnerable person first. Well, actually, you can't help the vulnerable person long term if you run out of puff.
Did you get anything personally out of, I mean, obviously you wouldn't abandon your father, but did you get anything out of that experience? What did you get out of that experience?
An incredible admiration for people who do a caring job professionally.
But in terms of your relationship with him? Just that you'd done the right thing?
That I'd done the right thing, despite the past. That in a way the past becomes completely irrelevant, and that all you see is vulnerability, all you see is frailty, and you think, out of human decency, it doesn't matter whether my father was an awful father and an ogre of a father and beat me when I was a child, or locked me up for days without food, or whatever it was that he did. It doesn't matter. This is just another human being who is broken. And what would I want someone to do if I were in his place? And you find a reserve of empathy, you find a reserve of compassion, which just gets you over the line. So from my point of view, my father was very fastidious, he was a dandy, and I wanted to make sure that his dignity, I think, you know, this word is so loaded and freighted, but it comes up in conversation time and time again. Dignity is what you want for your parents in that kind of extreme situation. And I think that as a society we have a tremendous problem with the word dignity because we've invested it in the plumbing, in the body, and we think that when a person becomes incontinent they've lost their dignity. I would like to see us extract dignity from the plumbing, which will always let us down in the end. So let's park our dignity somewhere else where we don't have to subject ourselves to these terrible feelings of shame when the plumbing goes wrong.
And so what's dignity finally? What's a dignified end?
Dignity is about agency, it's about choice, it's about having someone represent you and defend you and look after you when you lose that voice. It's about remembering that you were someone, you know, that you had a life that counted, that you made a contribution, and that should be honoured and respected in some way.
Thanks very much for talking to me. It was lovely.
Pleasure.